Hello there and welcome to In My Opinion for Rune Factory 5.
After being spit out of some portal, you come to with no memory of what happened, but there's no time to gather yourself as there's a child in danger. After saving her, you faint and find yourself in the little town of Rigbarth. This is where you meet some of the characters and realize your memory is really screwed up, and you don't even remember much of your past and barely know your name and birthday. Eventually you join Seed, which is basically like the cops who not only help protect people from monsters, but also help with other tasks. At some point you get a mission to check out a ruined energy disturbance, which does lead to a big mystery and may have a connection to your past. So it's up to you and your new friends to solve it. The story itself is nothing amazing, and there are parts of it that could have been done better, but it's good enough to keep you playing till it's over. The cast of colorful characters help inject some enjoyment to the story since they are chock full of personality and you're bound to enjoy some of their dialogue and company. If you're not familiar with Rune Factory from word of mouth or even my first review, then let me explain what it is exactly. It's parts farming, socializing, action JRPG. Yeah, there are many gameplay parts to this series. One of the first things you'll be introduced to is farming and your farming plot. Here's where you can plant your seeds and tend to them by watering them and keeping the soil healthy by putting some grass in the bucket. You can get seeds by buying them at the store, enemy drops, and there are some crops that will drop some more seeds when you harvest them. All you gotta do is plow the field and plant the seed, and then just add some water. I do like that each seed lets you know beforehand how long it will take to grow, how much you will harvest, and what season it grows best in, as there are 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and finally winter. The game also lets you know if it will be sunny or cloudy, and if it's cloudy there's a slight chance of rain, which is helpful since you only have a certain amount of time to do stuff each day, and if it rains, the crops get watered by it instead of using a watering can. As you play through the game, you will gain more farms in the form of nifty farming dragons. You just have to clean up the land and continue to do what you did on your first farm. And these dragons are not like the seasonal farms in past games, as the season and weather is the same on all farms. And by the end of the game, you will have 6 different farms to mess with. On these farm dragons, you can also build barns in which you contain monsters like chicken for eggs, sheep for wool, and cows for milk. All you have to do is give them some food and hope they become friends. It's kind of random, which can get a tiny bit annoying, so it's best to save before you try. The farming itself is not too complicated, as even though they talk about soil quality and so on, it never felt like your crop outcome would live or die by it, so you never feel overwhelmed. Just be sure to water your crops daily as they can wither and die. Also be mindful of incoming typhoons, as even though they are not common, they can wipe out a big part of your farms, and the only real defense is either to buy or make a special formula that will protect at least 1 square of each part of your plot, which there are 4 planting spots in each square, or you can also spend crystals at each dragon farm to build up that dragon's defense against a typhoon. There are also other things you can do with these crystals, such as increase the amount of crops you harvest, make it rain on that dragon so you don't have to water the land, expand the farmable area, and more. Now on to the social aspect to this game, which is very important as you'll be interacting with these characters a lot. You can freely talk to whoever you want, and by looking at your handy dandy map, you can see where they are located, making it easier to plan your route. Talking to these colorful folk will help bring up your friendship, which you can check out in the menu whenever you want. You start at 0 with 10 being the max friendship, and besides talking to them, you can also give them gifts. The game lets you give them 2 gifts a day max, though one has to be something they like and something they love, which you can tell by the color of the note that pops above their head. Though watch out, as you can also end up giving them something that they hate and decrease your friendship. You can find out more about their likes just by talking to them, and the more you get close, the more open they become. Like Lucy talking about the joy of competition and the stress of taking care of her brother Julian, or Scarlet and what her duties are for the day and her losing sleep over a puzzle, or Riker wondering why you have so much energy and trying to find a new place to lay around, or Simone maybe teasing you about being a guinea pig for her new medicine, and so forth. You really do start to become more personal with them as you get closer. They even share their birthdays with your in-game calendar marks, and giving them gifts during this special day increases how much their friendship meter goes up. I will admit I use the gift guide while playing because while they do tell you their likes, it's not all of them, and some things are easier to get than others. So there is no shame in using a guide. When you first start, you might notice that there aren't too many people in town, and that's because some only show up as you progress through the story, such as Misasagi, who doesn't pop up until you complete the first dungeon. There are also many events shown by an exclamation point on the map that will show little scenes between characters like Julian and Hina playing. You might have also noticed giant red markers on the map. These are the spots to go if you want to continue the main story. Of course, there's a romance aspect here, as it wouldn't be Rune Factory without it, and you have a choice between 6 bachelors and bachelorettes, and you can tell which are the romance options by the hearts in the friendship menu. I have to admit the choices here ain't bad at all, so I'm sure you'll find someone to like. Also, for the first time, you can pick whoever you want to be with, no matter if you pick to be a guy or a gal. As you level up their friendship level, you will get special character events, which you can tell by the pink marker that has their faces on them. These events allow you to get close to these characters and learn about their personal thoughts in life, more than the usual stuff in the normal social situations. It will also show off little cute moments for the character, and their dialogue would even change a bit when you normally talk to them, which is a nice touch. I actually went through all the Bachelor and Bachelorette's events to see as much as I could. Thankfully, unlike the last Rune Factory, these events don't happen randomly, and you can pick and choose who you want to focus on first, and when you start one, you're not allowed to pick another until this event is over, which can be that day, or you may have to go through a day or two. If some don't pop up, don't worry, as some are tied to your story progress. After you clear all the events for a character and are at least on friendship level 7, you can confess your love to them and start dating. If they accept, they will tell you to meet you the next day, where you will have a sweet little moment and get to pick pet names for each other. And what's neat is while some of these names are the same for everyone, there are some that are character specific. You're allowed to date as many characters as you want with no negative outcomes. Just a heads up, you can only confess to one character per day, and when you try to confess, they can reject you and you will have to try again, but this has more to do with RNG. So basically, save before you confess, and if it fails, reload and keep trying till it works. Once you go out on a certain amount of dates, you can then ask them to marry you as long as you upgrade your house, have a certain bed, and of course, give them a ring. This is the point of no return when it comes to romance, as once you're married, you are committed to that person. I've personally been going back and forth between Scarlett and Lucy myself. After the wedding, you can eventually have some kids and just live your life. Let's talk about the many shops that will come in handy, not only getting the gifts you need, but also get you the things to make some cash. The good thing is each shop has their opening and closing time outside, so you can manage your time around that. Anywho, first I'll start with Serendipity, which is basically the general store. Here you can buy seeds to grow on your farm and other necessities for cooking like flour, oil, powder, and so on. There are also farm tools that are important that you can buy here, like clippers to gather wool, a brush to tame your barn animals, making them more friendly and giving you better product, and a magnifying glass will let you see the status of your crop, which is insanely helpful since there's no other way to see its level or growth speed. Next is Sweet Hearth, a bakery which you can buy recipe bread, which allows you to learn brand new recipes, not only for cooking but for foraging, crafting, farming, and chemistry. There's a Lackadaisy in which you can order meals to get some buffs and also buy some cooking recipe bread. The clinic lets you buy stuff like potions and antidotes. The Blue Moon is a bathhouse that lets you relax and get some temporary buffs if you choose a certain bath. Flowers Truck is a store you get way later as you need to bring Ludmilla into town. In here, like the name says, you can buy flowers and flower seeds. You can also buy formulas for your farm, one which is actually very helpful as it grows your crops faster. The crystal shop lets you buy things like those crystals I mentioned for the farm dragons, and if you have crystal bits, you can hand those over and get fully formed crystals for free. You can also buy magic spells as well for combat, and there's even a rotating shop that opens at a certain time each day that can contain some really rare items to buy. I almost forgot the blacksmith where you could buy weapons and ore. It's just I was rarely in there because you could easily get ore yourself and build better weapons. And if I was in there, it was just to talk to someone. Now, one of the most important shops is Studio Palmo. Here you will find Palmo and Riker, and talking to them will allow you to do a few things. First, you can buy furniture and wallpaper to spruce up your home, which is always nice. One of the other things you can do is venerate the other shops, and some of these venerations can be helpful, such as adding a fish shop to the general store. It also lets Lucas in the crystal store upgrade any of your magic skills for a fee, which is extremely helpful in combat. It can add a clothing shop to the bakery, which is nice since I like what I'm wearing now compared to the default outfit. And it increases the amount of recipe breads you can buy in both the bakery and Lackadaisy, since the amount you can buy is at set limit. Upgrading the clinic lets you get a vaccine that gets you temporary buffs for a day, and all around for each shop, the venerations can increase the amount of items they have for sale. While that's all fine and dandy, the main reason you're here is to buy your cooking and building tools. There are many ways to make food, such as chopping, steaming, blending, handmade, and much more. These foods can help you heal, give you temporary buffs, and restore your RP, which is that blue bar you see under your health. RP drains every time you do an action like farming or attacking, and once it's gone, your HP will decrease instead. And if you hit 0, you will pass out and wind up in the clinic. Sometimes they will heal you for free, but most of the time you will have a pricey bill. Though the good thing is that's the only negative to getting knocked out. You can buy a forge to make weapons and new farming tools. So you can make new watering cans and hoes, which can let you charge to cover more farming ground instead of watering or plowing every single spot one at a time, which is a huge time saver. Also, there's your sickle, which you can use to upgrade your crop's level, and the better sickle you have, the higher crop level you can get, making the crop more valuable. The crafting table lets you make new armor pieces and accessories so you can increase your defense and resistance. Lastly, there's a chemistry table which lets you make such things as potions, antidotes, and formulas for your farming. Of course, you can buy some of these things, but making them saves you a lot of dough. All of these things can also be given as gifts, as there are times when you give a handmade gift rather than a bought one that the person will give you a gift right back, such as materials, food, and even Simone the doctor will give you an item to increase your overall stats. These items can also be sold by dropping them in your shipping box that's next to your first farm plot. And you can see how much each item goes for, which is helpful if you want to make money fast. Also, if you sell a seed bag after leveling it up, you'll be able to buy said seed at that level whenever you want from the shops. Same goes for your harvest goods, which is great since it would be annoying as all hell if you had to re-level the seeds every time you wanted to use them. Just some friendly information, there is a little exploit with curry that can earn you tons of money at the beginning of the game. Just give it a look up. To learn how to make better food, weapons, and so on, you just have to keep making them and filling up your experience bar you see in the upper right corner. Once you level up, try recipe bread to see if you learn anything new. What's great is the game will let you know how much RP you will waste trying to make any of these items, and it also lets you know what cooking, foraging, chemistry, and crafting level that you have to be to make it. Sometimes you can be underleveled and succeed, but it's best to save before you try that. Now all of these tools and renovations of course cost money, but they also need wood and stone material, which can be gathered by using your axe and hammer. There are gathering spots all over the place, be it your farms, outside the town, and even inside the town. The tree stumps and boulders will disappear after you collect all you can, but the good thing is they reappear the next day in the same spot. Or you can save after collecting, then load up your game and bam, they show up again, which is another helpful little trick. Let's touch on the combat, which you have 8 weapon types to mess with, which are fist, my personal favorite, short sword, long sword, hammer, axe, spear, dual blades, and magic staff. They do feel a bit different from one another, such as longsword being really strong but slow to swing, and dual blades being insanely fast but not as damaging. The fist even has a special caveat that I feel makes it godlike, which is the ability to grab and manhandle the enemies. Even if your fist weapon isn't that powerful with no more attacks, once you throw an enemy, it deals a crap ton of damage to not only who you throwing, but those around them. If I recall, Rune Factory Ties of Destiny, being the last full 3D game, didn't have a lock on, and thankfully this one does, making it easier to keep track and hit the enemy. They also put a dash feature in combat in which, if you time it right, lets you pass an enemy's attack and slow down time for a quick second. It's also really helpful when dungeons have traps like ice crystals and fire, as you can dash into them and trigger this and get no damage. You also have 2 types of runes you can use. One is meant for special attacks for your weapons, and I have to admit, I found these useless and you're better off attacking normally. The next type is magical spells like water beams and light balls that defend you, and these are actually very useful. As I mentioned before, you can eventually upgrade these and they become god tier strong, taking on enemies in a blink of an eye. And even before the upgrade, they are still really helpful. You can easily equip weapons and runes on the fly with the quick menu, making changing up your loadout really easy, and you can even have 2 magical runes at the same time if you want. As you can tell, you can take some of your friends along for combat and you can take up to 3 at a time, but to be honest, I was just fine taking 1. And to level them up, they don't even need to kill anyone, they just need to be in your team when you kill something, making leveling a really weak teammate headache free. And even if they fall in battle, all you need to do is walk away and they'll get up on their own. Or if you want to stop them from being knocked out, you can heal them with items and even a spell. You can also deck them out with weapons and armor, making them put up more of a fight. You just gotta give it to them like you would a gift. There's even a special team move called Link Attacks that you can pull off by raising the meter when your partner attacks or gets hurt. And you can keep track of the meter as it's in their health bar. And depending on their weapon, it can look different, and it's a cool little cutscene attack and it does a good amount of damage. Combat at the end of the day is nothing earth-shattering, like you're not pulling off Devil May Cry combos, but it's simple and fun. Since I mentioned it, let's talk about the leveling system. Of course, you have a usual leveling system by just killing stuff, and when you level up, your stats increase. Now, this is not the only thing that can be leveled up, as pretty much everything has an experience bar. Be it chopping wood, making stuff like I mentioned before, hell, even walking and sleeping can be leveled up. Just like normal leveling up all that other stuff has great benefits, such as making you waste less RP, and it makes you stronger, such as getting fire elemental leveled up makes you stronger with fire attacks. These levels could also be increased randomly while farming, as when you pluck your crop, sometimes orbs pop up and give you an increase in something. Even in combat, when you use a weapon, it levels it up, letting you learn new attacks, and leveling it up also makes more weapons available to forge. I really like the fact that no matter what you do in this game, you feel like you're making some sort of progress, and you can actually check your level progress easily in the menus. There's also a system called seed points, SP for short, that you need to gather for certain things, and you can do this by doing stuff like killing monsters and doing board requests. Board requests are little missions that the townfolk asked you to do. These range from things like giving them a certain item, gathering a certain item, shipping an item, and so on. Not only does this give you seed points depending on said requests, it can also add product like brand new seeds to grow. You only can take on a set amount at a time, but thankfully the game lets you know what rewards you will get, so you can pick and choose. Also, if there's like a request that says farm 4 different flowers and you have already done this, then the quest will be completed the second you choose it, which makes things easier. I will give a little tip. One of the best ways to earn C points is to kill a monster, more specifically a boss. This is easy because you're allowed to refight any boss you've beaten at least once a day. And thanks to your map, it makes it stress-free since using a map allows you to teleport anywhere you've been. This is also useful just for the simple fact that you can complete one dungeon floor, stop if the day is coming to an end, and then teleport to the floor you left off the next day. Speaking of the dungeons, I do feel that they are the right size, as it doesn't feel like they go on forever, with the only really big one being near the end of the game, and even that one is not too crazy. In fact, the only dungeon I had beef with was the floating fortress, since there's a little trick on one of the floors that you won't really notice at first, especially with how the previous floors worked. I also like that each dungeon has a sign on the outside letting you know what materials you can get in them. Now the reason you need SP is for things like the renovations I mentioned before, and most importantly making directives, which are made by talking to what I think is some type of puppet called Saint Eliza. These directives are things like making your on-hand inventory, fridge, and storage box much bigger, getting licenses to do all that foraging cooking, and starting a festival. There are some festivals already coming up that you can check on your calendar, but it's not much, and most of the festivals are made through directives. The festivals themselves can be something like a monthly harvest festival where you show off your crops, or it can be something like grabbing beans or dodging raging cows. It's actually pretty fun, and everyone usually gathers around the festival grounds, so it's easy to give gifts to them all in one shot. And they even have unique dialogue for the festival. Also, Simone always gives you the rundown of the rules the day before and on the day itself, so you're not going in blind. There is a first, second, and third place winner, and each gives you rewards and earns you some SP. You can also change the difficulty when talking to Eliza if you want the game easier or harder. This can be done at any time, which is great if you're having trouble or want a little more challenge. The game also has bounty missions in which Livia has some wanted monsters she wants captured. These can be rather tough, as the first time I got a bounty I tried to go for it and didn't even make a dent in its health, so I just waited till I got stronger and better gear. Once it's weak enough, you can grab it with your spell seal. Turning these in not only gives you some rewards like crafting materials, but it gives you some SP once you round up a certain amount. It also ranks up your seed rank, which gives you new crests which act like abilities, such as gaining more SP than usual and giving you medical insurance so your doctor bill won't be as much if you get knocked out. And you're allowed to equip 2 at a time. With the spell seal, you can also freeze monsters in combat, which also has a chance of giving you mini crystals and even make some temporary allies. But if you want one permanently for your barn, you must tame them instead, which works just like how you get your chickens and such. You can even make bosses become your allies, but you have to give them a very specific item that's different to each boss. After that, you can take them into combat and even ride some of them by yourself or with another ally. There are other things you can do while walking around, like fishing, and different spots can have different types of fish to catch, even in dungeons. And just like the seeds you upgrade and sell, these fish can be sold as well, which can make them available to buy at the shop instead of fishing and hoping you catch the right fish over and over. Eventually, you can even team fish, will let you team up with a friend and play a very easy time-based minigame, which nets you double the fish. You also get this option when cooking in Lackadaisy later on in the game. After you finish the game, even more directives open, such as an extra 20-floor dungeon that has even harder enemies to face. You can also do things like change the gender, increase the level of the enemies, stop a typhoon, and more, which is all pretty great since it adds more content and options. There's also a voice commentary track at the start menu with the voice actors talking about their roles, but it's only in Japanese with subtitles. The visuals are nice as they're really bright and colorful, and I can't really say I found anything horribly ugly. Even most of the dungeons have a distinct look from one another, especially when you're reaching the end of the story. The character designs look great and are very creative, which helps them pop even more, and the voice acting is also wonderful, and there's a dual audio option if you want English or Japanese. The models themselves have some sort of filter on them, like a canvas painting or something like that. I can't really describe it, but it's not a bad decision. And the character stills used for conversations also look well drawn and even animate, adding more life to the characters. Every dungeon boss looks different from one another, and you only get color swap versions of them when you start to get to the final stretch of the game. I also like that the seasons actually change how the map, for the most part, looks. It's nice and green for summer, but once it hits autumn, everything gets a nice brown color. This makes the game feel like it's actually going through the seasons, and even the main menu gets in on this. Another nice touch is there are basically 2 arcs to the game's story, and once you start the new arc, you actually get a brand new opening, making it feel like a brand new season of an anime. Though if you want to see the old opening or any of the other little cutscenes the game has, which are mainly new character introductions, there is a camera you can pick in your room to watch them. Okay, now to talk about the biggest issue in the game, at least for the Switch version, which is what I'm playing on, and that's the performance. As you may have noticed in my footage while running out in the town, the frame rate ain't silky smooth. It's kinda low and it has some drops, and while I do wish it ran more smoothly, I can say people calling the game unplayable are over exaggerating. It never killed my experience, and when you're inside a dungeon or building, the frame rate becomes much better and more stable. Even when you're outside in combat, it doesn't screw up your attacks as I didn't feel any latency. When it comes to loading, the only real long load time is when you're starting up the game. Surprisingly, even though the game has frame rate issues, I didn't run into any bugs except for the ones I beat up in the game. Also, my performance experience was the same whether the game was docked or in handheld mode with dynamic resolution on.
So this is the one. Pardon me, but I've no interest in playing these games.
Huh?
Captain Livia was just telling me about you. Frankly, I cannot accept your admittance to Seed.
Even with the performance issues, I still had a great time with the game, and while the story is nothing to write home about, I still enjoyed going through it and interacting with all the characters. I like how laid back the game is, and it never feels like it's rushing you to do anything, and you can take your time and play how you want to. I was done with the main story by the first autumn month, and at that point I believe I put about 90 plus hours into the game, and that's also counting a good chunk of activities like romance, festivals, and such. I'm actually still playing the game now, and that 90 plus hours has turned to 100 hours. So the game has a lot of content for you to do even after beating it, like the extra dungeon and getting married and having kids. There's even still board missions to complete. So you pick this up, you're in for a good amount of gameplay time. I will say this is another good entry into the Rune Factory series, and I wouldn't let the people calling this unplayable scare you away. If you're a longtime fan or dipping your toes in for the very first time, this is not a bad entry to pick up. I hope you enjoy my thoughts on this game, and for gamer's sake, keep gaming.